Welcome and greetings and salutations, geeks, and welcome back to another episode of Geeking Off the Page.
Hooray!
For those keeping count, this is episode 49. Look at that. That's 7 times 7. Just think of all the luck this episode has to have. I'm here with Michael.
Yes, you are.
We will be joined from a pre-recorded segment from Troy. Unfortunately, he can't make it tonight, but fingers crossed he'll be there for the big 5-0 next week. We're going to start off with Sandman. We talked about it briefly last week. This is Netflix's series of Sandman. Mike has had a chance to start going through the episodes. I've been able to get about halfway through episode 2. So Mike is going to spoil the crap out of this with all his thoughts and insights. Take it away, Mike.
Well, okay, I am going to spoil it, but let's hear your part before I go off on a tangent. So, because you're an episode or two in?
I am. I'm going to say so far I'm enjoying most of what I've been seeing so far. The visuals are really nice. There are some issues I'm having with some of the casting and some of the direction that some of the things are going. I think they got Morpheus back into the dreaming too quickly. I think they needed to set him up in the real world a little bit longer so that we get a sense of that how long he's been gone and what's happened to the dreaming while he's been gone. It really feels too abrupt for things to go, basically go to pot that fast. That being said, I like the visual cinematography. It feels like there are someone went through and cut out certain panels of the comic book and said, let's replicate this on screen. And they've been doing that pretty faithfully. And it's something to look forward to when you're like, ooh, I can see where this is leading. And then you see that iconic panel come to life. Those have been really nice. I'm hoping to look forward to seeing more of those in the rest of the episodes. As I said, I'm only about, I'd say 3/4 the way through episode 2, maybe just past, maybe 2/3, just past the halfway mark, but not quite all the way done. So yeah, I'm having a good time with it. I'm praying to God it doesn't just go south. Now the problem is social media has
Well,
been,
okay, you're going to have to pray a little harder, but
all
keep
right.
going.
But social media has people friends who've been watching the show have been spoiling it left and right, saying "Ooh, I'm not going to spoil it," but and then they proceed to spoil it. So I'm not worried about Mike spoiling anything for me. I'm probably at some point going to be able to get the time and carry my way through the series. So Mike, on to you.
Okay, so this one, again, Netflix has been bothering me with the whole woke casting thing that they've been doing. I know Gavin chirps me on the side chats about that, but I do stand by it. It's kind of like there's a department at Netflix that takes a handful of Skittles and throws it at a wall, and whatever color hits is what they cast. It's kind of, but that's the side story. So, anyways, going into this, after seeing the trailer with the different gender swaps and race swaps, I had an inclination that they weren't going to stay true to the story, where, the diversity agenda was higher than capturing the comic book to film. However, like we said last week, after that first episode, I was hooked, right? Troy said, give it 3 minutes. I gave it 3 minutes. I gave it an episode. And then I just binged the first 5. And the first 5 episodes were amazing. Now, there's some stuff in there. Again, it's sort of like what I was saying with Dune, how Dune should have been the best science fiction movie of all time. But because they made some wrong choices, it wasn't. But it could have been. And for the first 5 episodes here, even episode 6, it could have been one of the best comic adaptations to film of all time, but it wasn't. And again, that's because I'm curious. I would love to get an inside scoop on this. Where did the choices come from? Was it the director? Was it the diversity department? Was it producers? When you can get so many things so spot on, like Tom Sturridge as Sandman, I think was perfect. His portrayal of the character, his little pouty lips and stuff, which kind of reminded me of Christian Bale's Batman, but for Sandman, for some reason, it worked because it just looked cool and emo and goth, and it was really well done. He did such a good job as a character of Dream when he was, quiet and silent. Just a look on his face captured so much emotion. And when the one Raven came to rescue him, and you see a little smile on his face before he gets blown away with a shotgun, and then you see him go sad again, so much emotion. And when he goes and actually accesses his full powers, it just feels so intense and so like magnificent. Like, hats off to Tom Sturridge for doing a great job as Morpheus, because that's a character I thought would be hard. Again, wish he had the black contact lenses, but otherwise, stellar performance. Where was I going before that? I went off on a tangent. The overall idea of like throwing Skittles at the casting board. They got so many characters so right and so many characters so wrong that I want to know what happened behind the scenes there. I mean, Jenna Coleman, that's the huge one. She shows up as Johanna Constantine, which is interesting because in the comic books, it's actually John Constantine. So who knows if it's licensing rights or what the story is with that. But how cool would that be if you actually had an actual John Constantine show up there? Because DC's trying to make their whole multiverse thing. Have Keanu Reeves show up, or whoever played the other John Constantine show up. Like, there's an opportunity to expand that universe. Now, that said, Jenna Coleman, she stole the show in all those episodes. And that's one of those casting changes where you gender swap John Constantine. And I didn't mind it because she's so charismatic. And every single scene she was in, she stole the show. But again, that's why she should be Death. Because when she's on screen, she steals the show. And there's an episode later. What was the name of it? The Sound of Her Wings. And again, that's the first appearance of Death in the comics. And I couldn't really attach myself to it because it just in my head, because the casting was wrong. And
Kirby Howell Batiste.
That's the one.
I was looking at the wrong list.
I actually saved an image for this so I could remember, but of course, we're doing it live in the wild.
I'm going to say as a little side note, when I first heard that they were going to do Sandman, and I remember reading this like back in college in the 90s, it's been, not a short amount of time. Like this was 25 years ago that this was written. Some literary works, be it comic books, graphic novels, don't age well. They don't translate well. It was a different time, 2010s versus 2000 versus the 90s. It doesn't seem like a lot of time. And, in the grand scheme of things, it's like a blink of an eye. But trends change a lot. Like, think of what was popular in the start of the 90s to the mid 90s to the end of the 90s. And then you go to now, and stuff that was acceptable in the mid 90s is considered, not acceptable, or things have to be changed to fit today's standards or today's acceptability. And this is the problem I find with, what, as you're saying, like the woke casting and stuff, that is, if you were to take like, what would be considered like seminal literary works like War and Peace, if you tried to cast War and Peace today, you would have different groups screaming that this group of people aren't being represented enough, and this group of people are being overrepresented. But at the time that this work was created, that was the norm. And I think that's part of what the problem is trying to adapt something that when Neil Gaiman wrote this and it was drawn back in the 90s, yeah, all of like Dream and Desire and Death are all pale white goth, basically goth kids, because that was the thing at the time. Goth culture was
Yeah,
really big.
and that's essentially what Neil Gaiman was. I mean, he was
Yeah.
harnessing that mindset, that culture.
So when you then try to translate this to 2022, people are like, there's too many, pale white kids. That's how it was written. That's how it worked. And I think that's part of the problem, like you and other people are having, is that when you then say, well, no, we have to get some gender diversity and some racial diversity in there, that's not how it was written. So it's some people say, well, you're stuck in the past and you can't change with the times. But the other time, the other hand of that is why are you messing around with something that worked? Why do you have to keep reinventing the wheels? And oh, round is just too round. We're going to put some square wheels on this because square's in now. That's the problem I'm having.
And a big problem is, and I'm going to get this after episode 6, but it gets to the point where, I mean, you want to have diversity. Fine, I understand that. And in fact, episode 5 has some great diversity. But it gets to a point where, is that detracting from the story? No, it's like, are you going to do a Martin Luther King movie with Ming-Na Wen as Martin Luther King? Like, what? But we have to diversify. Do you though? Like, do you really? Like, who's going to be the next Black Panther?
Exactly.
No,
Well,
it,
I was
it
just I was watching clips of Weekend Update on Saturday Night Live, and there was this bit they did where they're going to be doing what's his name, Old Blue Eyes, Frank Sinatra biopic with Scott Staff of all people, and then the joke was, but don't worry, Sammy Davis Jr. will be played by Scarlett Johansson. And the joke, it was the poke at Michael Jost because he's married to Scarlett Johansson. So
okay.
yeah, that was the big joke. But that's also harkening back to like her playing a Japanese woman in Ghost in the Shell, and
Yeah,
people saying whitewashing in Hollywood sort of stuff. But at the same time, it is kind of a joke of the time of like, oh, we're gonna make this movie like if you made like 12 Angry Men and they're like, hey, we no, it says 12 Angry Men. Eh, what if 6 of them were women and maybe
and dwarves
yeah,
and black and had no beards. It's like,
yeah, and
whoa, what is this? Amazon Prime?
yeah, and then you're like, is it really 12 Angry Men anymore? You could say it's based off of 12 Angry Men, but don't just slap the title on it because then you're like, it's 12 Angry Men. Well, actually, it's 5 Angry Men, 4 Angry Women, maybe a non-binary, and a couple of transgenders, and then you're like, then change the title, you know?
Right.
So this is, I think, part of the problem with things like Sandman, or even going back to older works where they're like, oh, we're going to be taking such and such book and adapting it for a movie today, but then you change all the characters because you're like, we
Yeah.
have to have diversity in a piece of work that didn't have diversity because at the
And
time
if
it
you
was
want
written.
to do that, I have no problem with doing that. Just Watchmen the shit out of it,
Yeah, I
right?
mean,
Take the Charlton heroes, do your own twist. Don't say it's Batman, say it's some other dude. Like, whatever it is, it, there's room for that because stories are fictional. Like, all of this is fake, it's made up, it didn't happen, as Jonathan Frakes would say.
yeah,
Um, so there's room to explore those ideas, like that Nope movie. We were talking about that before,
yeah,
and like Jordan Peele wanted to have a black cast. Like, that's your diversity right there,
that is.
right? You
I
have
mean,
a director that has his ethnic origins and he wants to communicate that to an audience, and it looks like it's going to be an awesome movie. Do that. Like,
yeah. Well, even the Ghostbuster movie with like the all-female cast, I was fine with that. But the problem that one had a problem of the movie
bad
couldn't
story,
figure out what its voice was, if it was going to
right?
be a remake or a reboot, or if it was going to be a sequel or a non. It was so wishy-washy. You wasted all that talent and all that time and made a horrible movie.
When
If
I
you're
heard
gonna,
they were going to do it an all-female Ghostbusters, I just pictured Peter Venkman hiring the next wave. It's like, a bunch of beautiful girls. Yes, you're
yeah,
hired.
yeah, doing it
Yes,
like,
you're
hey, we're going to
hired.
franchise this
Yes,
out.
you're hired.
Yeah, and he's like picking all the basically the bikini models, and
Right.
then on the first day, well, no, they didn't meet the qualifications. Here's the four ladies who did meet the qualifications. He's like, oh, we gotta go with it. You know, they paid their fees. We've already got the franchising going. Have at it, ladies. That would have been
Yeah,
fun.
it
But
would be
because,
hilarious.
but again, this goes back to my whole idea of story trumps just about everything else. You know,
Yeah.
but if you're going to start with a good story, don't muck it up. Don't figure that you know better than the person who wrote it and go, well, I'm going to make these changes and it'll be great. That's a lot of
Es-
hubris.
Especially when you're pushing a political agenda,
Yeah,
or
exactly.
like it's not a creative choice. Okay, one sort of, I guess, diverse casting that I 100% agree with is Samuel L. Jackson as Nick Fury. And that's because in the Ultimates, they were revamping the series. Again, we're a long way off from World War II at this point,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's like, okay, we're going to upgrade everything. You know, the Avengers, a whole bunch of white people, and they're also thinking, who's the coolest guy in Hollywood right now?
Samuel L.
Samuel L.
Jackson.
Jackson. It's like him as Nick Fury. Yeah, because he's the coolest. Let's put him in. And it works. Like that's one case where they made it change because you couldn't have the old school one. Like you couldn't have your David Hasselhoff, Nick Fury
Oh,
in
thank
there,
God.
right?
Oh my God,
and
that
and
was
in my
horrible.
fictional MCU universe in my head, I keep imagining there was the original Nick Fury with the Howling Commandos. And that became like a moniker. Like, right? He was the intelligence guy.
Mm-hmm.
And when he passed on the title, went on to this new guy. And then that really screwed up Hydra. Like, what the hell is going on? Why is Nick Fury still here? Why is he this dude? Like, what's,
Well, there's a really interesting theory a while back when they were cycling through all the different Bond actors, you know, Roger Moore and Sean Connery, and then like, all right, let's do Timothy Dalton, and then let's do Pierce Brosnan. And the idea was passed forward that it's not just the 007 moniker that is kind of used. It's also the person is given the name James Bond.
yeah,
So
I
the
heard that
James
theory
Bond
and I liked
character
it.
is eternal. So it doesn't matter if it's Blofeld or whoever, whenever they're facing 007, they're facing James Bond. And when that James Bond is retired or killed, the next 007 is given not only the 007 license to kill, but is also given the name James Bond. And since James can be used for both men and women, I'm fine with a female Bond, but call them James Bond. So there's still James Bond 007. And that's the legacy that's going forward. So when they're like, oh no, James Bond, you're like, where? Which one's James Bond? And like, the one that just
See,
shot you. That was James Bond.
exactly. So that's where I actually got this theory from. Now, I don't like it being used for James Bond because I'm a huge fan of the Ian Fleming novels.
Mm-hmm.
And, like that's canon. Like, don't mess with that. Like, James Bond is the actual dude. But that theory I loved, and I thought it could be applied to the Nick Fury situation. So, anyways, that's where I came up with it. So in Marvel Comics, they try to, I guess, rationalize it by having it being Nick Fury's son and from another dimension, or I forget
Yeah.
how
Well,
they
is the
went.
Ultimate Dimension is different than the mainstream
But
Marvel canon.
but they pulled it in, like they tried to merge the two
Yeah.
together because obviously the movies were doing good, and it's like, oh, we want to bring him into this universe, and they did a whole bunch of silly stuff. But I did like that theory where it's like, no, you pass on the title. And if you're a super spy and your enemies are watching, it's like, how is this guy still alive? How is he still coming? Why is he a black guy now? Like, what the hell? Like, it just,
Really good plastic
boom.
surgery.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. So it's I don't, I mean, for me personally, I don't mind when a project comes up and they're like, all right, we're going to do some, Rule 34, change the sex of characters, or we're going to change, make this character this for, make this character black, or make this character Chinese, or we're going to take this Chinese character and make them white. But be thoughtful about who these characters are. So in my mind,
Right.
like
What's the reason?
all the characters, like as I said, desire, dream, death, said they should all have, because they're all related.
Yeah.
It's like a family, so they should look like a
And
family.
even though they're fantasy, right? Like it's into this weird realm, so you can do funky stuff with it.
Yeah,
But
but
I
there's
agree
got to
with
be
you.
something tying it all together.
Yes.
And to me, it's when they do casting like this, it's whoever was doing the writing, or writing or casting, was like, hey, we can make this change and it'll be fine. And again, that's going back to, you have to love what it is you're creating, and if you don't, it shows.
Right.
So back to your review of Sandman. Man, we've gone all over the place on this, haven't we?
We are so off-roading.
Take us your
One
road
of the
sign.
ones in the first few episodes that they did the gender swap, race swap, is Lucien.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one that triggered me so bad in the trailers. Although watching in the show for the first few episodes, it didn't bother me. And I don't know if that's just because on screen there was a contrast with the pale white skin and the dark skin and the crazy hair and the shaved head. The two of them played off each other really well in the first few episodes. But it wasn't until later in the series, like the Dollhouse, where she has to kind of hold her own on screen with Cain and Abel.
Mm-hmm.
And that was where it's like, oh no, like this is way off from what it should be. And again, she is from the, what's it, House of Mystery comics? Like,
Yeah.
so, or he was. So that was a character Gaiman pulled into Sandman from a way old comic book.
Yeah.
And, there's a historical tie there. Like, you don't need to switch up this character. It doesn't add anything to the story except fix your diversity numbers. But the Dollhouse, that's where things kind of came off the rails for me for casting. Anyways, time skip, jump back. The first 5 episodes, yeah, I couldn't get enough of them. What's the name? David Thewlis as John D.
Mm-hmm.
That was a standout performance, and this is one where in the comic books, the character is basically like a gargoyle. Just like this
Yeah.
mutant zombie human walking around. But the way he played the character and how creepy he was on screen, he was empathetic and creepy at the same time. And there's the episode 24/7. And that's the one where, okay, so okay, time skip back. Let's get back to Gwendolyn Christie. So Gwendolyn Christie as Lucifer. That was when I saw some online outrage about, although again, this is another casting I thought really worked. If you look at the comic book,
Mm-hmm.
Lucifer is drawn very feminine and very imposing and powerful. And when you see them on screen together, Sandman and Lucifer,
Mm-hmm.
so you just see this gigantic, towering, like pretty female, but powerful and little scrawny Sandman going up against her. It really worked. And that's one I wasn't sure if the casting was right for that, but seeing the episode, I thought they did a great job with that one. And of course, this is the episode where Sandman's in hell battling Lucifer to get his helmet back. And it's that whole like poetry thing. It's like a Tolkien
Yeah.
riddle battle.
A poetry
And
slam.
yes, and it was done so well and so close to the comic. And even the demon, I forget his name, with the spiky hair who is trying to get it back from, like in the comic book, it's completely ridiculous. And in the TV show, it's still ridiculous, but they actually grounded it just a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And that was done so well. So you go, where are you going to go after battling Lucifer in hell? Well, you're going to go to a diner and see what happens next. And the diner episode was the one that completely exploded my brain. Full of diversity all over the place, like all the characters, genders, whatever, sexual preferences, doesn't matter. It's all over the map. And a lot of it is still pulled from the comic. Again, Neil Gaiman was very progressive, but visually it worked because the different races anchored the characters, the different like preferences showed like kind of into their deeper thoughts and souls. And it starts off as such a sweet episode, like Happy Diner. and then it just goes horribly wrong, and it literally descends into hell. It starts off, yeah, like a sweet diner, teen movie, and ends up like a slaughterhouse film. And it was so good. I was thinking, like, how can they go wrong? At that point, I was 100% sold on the rest of the series. And then the rest of the series happened. So after the fifth episode, we get into The Sound of Her Wings, which is the introduction of death. So Kirby Howell Baptiste. And now the actress played the part well. So hats off to her for doing a good job with that. But I can't get over the fact that Jenna Coleman wasn't death. So I was so triggered watching the whole episode because it was shot masterfully and it was so comic book accurate, and it could have been one of the greatest television episodes of all time. Just like Dune could have been one of the greatest science fiction movies of all time. But there was just that element that kept popping me out of it constantly. And the other thing weird about that episode is it's two comics combined. So it's the original Death episode. Then halfway through, it just switches to what I think in the comic books it was number 13 is the one with the guy who is immortal.
Mm-hmm.
So, Dream and Death made a bet. If he doesn't die, let's see what happens to him. So in the episode, it's a kind of hard turn. I don't know why they didn't just make it 2 episodes, because I think that would have been better. Like, just separate it. If it's two shorter episodes, I mean, it's Netflix. Who cares? Do whatever you want. But the craziest thing is at the end of the episode, Joanna Constantine shows up. And it's like, oh, Death's here to see what Sandman's doing. It's like, oh, wait, it's not Death. Shoot. It's like, and again, I can't get over how they had the perfect actress for the perfect role and they misused her. And that was hard. After that, we get into the dollhouse. And again, this for me is when it went completely off the rails and I just couldn't buy into it anymore. So Kaio Rai is Rose Walker. And again, when I was watching all of these, I always had the comic books beside me because it's been a while. It's been a couple decades since I've read them. And I was kind of curious to see what was accurate and what was changed. And also as a test for myself to see if I actually remembered it correctly. Because again, Neil Gaiman is very diverse and progressive in his original storytelling. So it was kind of like a fact check for myself. It's like, okay, let's see how much you remember. Let's see what you're triggered by. Let's see what was actually there to begin with. And it did end up being all the stuff I was triggered with was the stuff that didn't exist in the original story. But the Rose Walker is essentially, at least the way I perceive it, is old English wealth. Like, that's the family she came from.
Mm-hmm.
And so you would think you would cast, and in the comic book, she was, like a blonde, white English girl.
Yeah.
They kept the hair color with the coloring, like the punk stripes. That was accurate.
Mm-hmm.
But it's kind of like what Mark Bernard was saying about Batman. Like, Bruce Wayne comes from old money.
Yeah.
Like, you can't change that. That you have to keep that essence. Like, where did the character come from? And that's the origin of it. And this Rose Walker, to me, felt like that. Like, you have to keep that old English character to make the story progress, at least the way I saw it. So the fact that all of that got diversified by casting like black actors for everyone in that family and that segment, it just became too much. I got too popped out of the story, especially after the death episode. So already I was a little bit mentally triggered. So the fact that it kept going and kept going is like, okay, this is too much. And I'm just not connecting to the story anymore. So that was rough. That said, there was two amazing castings in this. Is Mark Hamill as, was a Murph Pumpkinhead. That was an amazing character. And like, even though I didn't want to watch all the episodes,
Hmm.
I definitely wanted to watch every single scene he was in. So I skipped through a whole bunch of Dollhouse, but I did not skip any Pumpkinhead. And then Stephen Fry as Gilbert. Again, perfect casting. So when you look at this whole season and how much they got right, you wonder why they got so much wrong. And again, I'd like to see a behind the scenes. I'd like to hear rumors of what happened or how things were done. I know Neil Gaiman is very defensive about everything, but of course, it's your property and your baby, and
Hmm.
you're getting the best chance at getting it put onto screen, and I'm sure you're getting a good paycheck. So obviously you want to defend it, and you're progressive anyway, so hooray for that. But like, where did those decisions come from? I don't know. I'd
Yeah,
like to find out though.
I'm sure at some point there's going to be like a behind the scenes or uh, something that I mean, Netflix doesn't always do that with stuff that's their property, but sometimes they do, and it's usually quite insightful. Um, but yeah, as I said, on social media, I've seen such a division of people who are like, Sandman is the most awesome thing ever, and other people like, I wish it was more faithful to the comic book.
I think they're both right.
Yeah, I find a lot of the people who are like gushing over it have not read the original comic. So their only taste of Sandman is what Netflix has just given them. And if that's the case, like, you know, if that's all you've ever seen of Sandman is that, then it may be perfectly adequate. But that's again, if you've read the source material and enjoyed the source material, what Netflix put out is, some of the problems you're having where it's the casting or merging comics into a single episode where it's Netflix. They've got the money, they've got the time. They could have made this instead of a 10 episode season. They could have made it 12 easy.
They even had the right actress.
Yeah.
Like, hopefully Troy will insert an image in here for the YouTube. But Jenna Coleman, there's an image from the comic of Death where she's just sitting on like a curb or something, and there's a photo of Jenna Coleman doing the same thing. It looks like the character. It's so close, and she was in the actual episode. How can you get that wrong?
It happens. And sadly it happens. Um yeah, so I'm still gonna end up watching all 10 episodes. Um I'll probably, I'll probably have some issues. But I'll like, bite my tongue, just get through it, see what they did with it. Um, so we'll see how that goes. Yeah.
Yeah,
Also coming up, so I'm gonna do a quick little jump. So I have been following Harley Quinn on HBO at Troy's suggestion,
I haven't seen any yet,
his
so let's hear it.
recommendation. I haven't seen this week's episode, which came out Thursday. Just so much came out, but I was able to catch the previous week's episode, which for people who've been following the boys, this is Harlequin's Hero Gasm episode. It's called The Thief, a Mole, and Orgy. So up until this point, this season has been Harley has basically stopped everything to support Ivy um, and her endeavors, who wants to kind of remake the world a bit, like use paleo plants to kind of regrow the world. And Ivy being Ivy, and she's trying to be very focused, but Harley being Harley keeps unintentionally throwing wrenches into the whole mix. Anyways, so Ivy's working on a terraforming serum. Harley, King Shark, and Clayface and Borgman have just been distracting her left, right, and center. Um, but her friend, the sentient plant Frank, has been kidnapped. So they find an owl-shaped badge, which means the Owl Society, which has been in DC Comics for the longest time. They believe they're responsible. So Harley and Ivy infiltrate the court, only to find out that the Owl Club is it's an orgy club. That's there's really no way of sugarcoating it. It's an orgy club. And so while they're going through, Harley and Ivy are kind of fighting a bit. Ivy had hooked up with Catwoman for a while, um, and they're trying to work things out. At the same time, Gordon is trying to unsuccessfully run for mayor, and Two Face is his campaign manager. But turns out Two Face is also the current mayor's campaign manager because well he's Two Face. But then the mayor through a very Final Destination ish sort of event, Gordon his actions somehow kill the mayor in very indirectly, and so Two Face is like, well, that narrows down my candidates I'm working for. Let's get you back on the ballot there, Gordon. Anyways, um, but he suggests that Gordon go to the orgy to get pictures that he can use as blackmail. And Gordon really doesn't know what he's doing. He recognizes Bruce Wayne and takes a selfie of him and Bruce. But at one point, it's all dark because they shut off the lights while the orgy is going on. And he drops his phone. He's turned on the flashlight function on his phone, but then he drops it. It's being kicked all over the floor, going everywhere.
Is
And
this done as a comedy?
really much as a comedy. Now,
Okay.
this is where the HBO will show anything, except for this episode where they kept digitally blurring out various things, and you're like, really, HBO? I mean, it's number one, it's a cartoon. Who cares? And number two, you're HBO. I mean, what?
Right. You gave us Game of Thrones, man.
Yeah. So, anyways, um, Harley and Ivy, they kind of patch up their relationship, and they head out. And the funniest thing is, so Two Face shows up and he says to Gordon, "Did you get the picture?" He's like, "Well, I got this really great selfie with Gordon." Turns out when he turned on the camera function on his or the light flashlight function on his phone, it was being kicked around the room. He had turned on the video function. It recorded everything. And so like Two Face is like, there is so much blackmail material on this phone right now. So he's all happy. And then so they Harley and Ivy made up. Now they realize that they've forgotten about Frank, and it cuts to Frank in an unknown laboratory, and he doesn't know what's going on, but he's freaking out. And that cuts to the next episode, which is, well, it's called "It's a Swamp Thing." So I'm assuming Swamp Thing's going to be in it. I look forward to watching that episode hopefully this weekend. But that's all I have so far. But I have to reiterate, I am loving this series. It is funnier than hell. And again, it's yeah, it is so much fun. So if you do get a chance to watch it, please do. Don't let your kids watch it. Don't let anyone under the age of 18 watch it because there's so many things that kids shouldn't find out about from this show. So yeah.
One thing you mentioned there that made me think of something else from Sandman about the blurring things out is the nudity in Sandman, which is almost nothing, including Despair. And that was one where Despair showed up. And again, the actress, Donna Preston, okay, she played the part great, especially when she starts hooking her face with the ring and, cutting herself like the way Despair does. Like, that was great. But she's wearing this big, comfy sweater. It's like, Despair looks way too comfortable in that big, comfy sweater, you know? Like, there's something about that. It's just that character was always so creepy with the nakedness and just looking like a gargoyle and just self-loathing, and it didn't have that in the episode, as well as a bunch of other stuff. Again, having the comic book open the whole time going through,
Yeah.
it's like, oh, this was way more hardcore in the comic, this was way more hardcore, it's like, this is Netflix. I mean, they've given us this before, just like you're saying with HBO. It's like,
Yeah.
you've given us this before. There's enough violence in Sandman that I'm not going to show it to my kids. Like, there's enough themes that are way too intense that they're not going to watch it. Again, stick to the source material. So yeah, same kind of thing. It's like if you're gonna go for it, go for it.
Yeah, exactly. Don't go halfway and then like, oh well, we could have. If
You're
you're
gonna blur
especially
the
if you're not going to
tunes,
be on cable,
man.
if you're not going to be on network TV, if you're going to be on like Netflix or HBO, balls to the wall, go for it.
Yeah, if you're gonna stick Harley Quinn in a hero gasm, well,
Yeah,
go for it. If
throw
that's
an
your
NC
choice,
like, throw an NC-17 label on it, say not suitable for young audiences, and then let the parents decide. Um, so also came out this
let the kids find it.
exactly. Also came out this week on August 12th was a movie we had posted the trailer for and had talked about earlier called Day Shift. And this is with Jamie Foxx, Dave Franco, Snoop Dogg, and a fun cast, including one of my favorite stuntmen, Scott Adkins. Anyway,
This is the vampire one, right?
this is the vampire movie I didn't know was coming, but honestly, it was the vampire movie I needed this summer. It is so much goddamn fun.
I haven't seen it yet. So tell me. Spoil it.
So
Spoil
the main
away.
character is Jamie Foxx. He plays Bud Jablinski. He is a blue collar dad providing for his family. The whole thing takes place in the San Fernando Valley. He has a job as a San Fernando Valley pool cleaner, but his real income comes from hunting vampires. And
Of
to get
course.
paid, you have to rip the fangs out of a vampire, and you find out without a fangs, the vampire basically starves to death. Um, and he sells the teeth. And you find out there's actually a hunters union for vampire hunting, but he's been kicked out because of so many violations. And there's a great scene. I even did this in IMDb where when he the first time his one of his best friends, played by Snoop Dogg, who's Big John Elliott, takes Bud back to the hunters union to kind of vouch for him to see if he can get him reinstated, because he needs $10,000 because his wife is gonna sell their house and move to Florida with her family, like with her mom. And they need $5,000 for the tuition for the daughter's school, as well as but another 5,000 for braces. So he's like, give me a week to come up with 10K. You guys stay. The wife says sure. So Big John Elliott takes Bud to the Hunters Union, and when the doors open, on the wall to the left is a big portrait of Abraham Lincoln and two axes. And for anyone who's ever seen Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, it is such a beautiful nod to Abe Lincoln being a vampire hunter because he uses axes as part of his hunting. And it was just a nice little nod to, yeah, Abe Lincoln was a vampire hunter. Anyways, he,
That's awesome.
Bud gets reinstated to the union as part of the day shift. So the night shift make the real money, the day shift not so much. And his handler is Dave Franco's character of Seth, who's there to kind of watch over Bud, make sure he doesn't, violate any more of the ordinances, keeps his nose clean, that sort of thing. That quickly goes out the window. Um, and the hilarity hijinks ensue. At the same time, the big bad, she is um, she is basically trying to take over the San Fernando Valley through real estate, to bring more vamps in. All kind of, you find that there's a diverse each. There are different types of vamps, um, and it kind of tells like their powers and who they associate with, sort of thing. And she just wants to kind of bring them all together. Um, and yeah, it's this. They have really thought out some of the lore. Like so after his first big hunting trip, Bud, he goes home and he takes this yellow powder and he's throwing it on himself and kind of like cringing in the showers. He's throwing this powder on him. You find out later he had come up with this powder. So I'm like, what this does is when you kill a vamp, if any of its blood gets on you, it's almost like almost like ant pheromones. You kill an ant, the other ants know. You kill a wasp, especially like wasp and horns. You kill one, as long as their blood or guts are on you, it's released a pheromone that all the other wasps or they attack. Same thing with vampires. You get vampire blood on you, other vampires can sniff you out, track you down, and will attack because they can smell it. Well, that powder neutralizes the blood, but it kind of burns it off, so it hurts
Oh, I
less.
love that idea. That's so cool.
Yeah, it's just little ideas like that. Like it's little things like that that make it like, all right, someone has been doing their homework to come up with these great ideas. And he makes this whole thing about when you're washing it off, don't get it near your eyes, don't get it near your asshole. And so Dave Franco's character the next day, he's like, I got something near my asshole. It really hurt. Um, and then yeah, so like the Nazarian brothers, Steve Howe and Scott Adkins, who are like premier hunters, they join Bud and Seth to what should have been a simple like four vamp kill, turns out to be a nest. And it's like a lot of vampires and some beautiful action, like knife boots, like knives hidden in boots and swords and all this fun stuff. And that's when they realize that all these different vampire species, subspecies, are all living together in the same house, and they shouldn't be. They shouldn't be at all. So that's when the guy's like Seth is like, there's something horribly wrong here. These people should not be all together. Anyway, the big bad figures out who Bud is, threatens the family, turns Seth into a vampire, and then there's the whole big showdown. And I mean, at one point, Bud cuts off Seth's head, but because he was turned by an ultra vampire, he can survive without his head for a little while. He manages to get it, stick it back on his head. They feed him some blood, it heals it up, but he's wants to help Seth, or Seth wants to help Bud with getting his family back and all that stuff. It turns out, as a vampire, he's a kick-ass fighter. Um, and then Snoop Dogg shows up with a goddamn electric minigun and uses it judiciously, and it is glorious. So, yeah, I'm not going to give away exactly how the ending spools out, but it is so much goddamn fun. Um, yeah, this is the, as I said, this is the vampire movie of 2022. I did not know was coming, but I needed this movie. I really did. I know it hasn't gotten the greatest reception. I think it's got like what is it, a 5.4 out of 10 on Rotten Tomatoes. Well, here's what I say to Rotten Tomatoes. Go fuck yourself. You know,
Oh,
if you can't have fun with a movie like this, like just turn your brain off, enjoy it. You know, yeah,
have
it's
you
not
read the
fun.
comments? What's the criticisms? Like, what are they saying? Are
Um,
they just like just bitching about nothing, or do they
okay,
have
let's see.
legitimate?
Starts off with a apparently goofy premise that aren't good enough to make up for the day shift, uninspired action comedy hijinks, which I kind of respond as you need to go get laid. You know, it's as simple as that. This is not high fucking society movie. This isn't like Shakespeare in the Park or any other sort of that. This is just let's have some fun. It's fucking vampires. Like it's not gonna be. You can't take it seriously to begin with. So, check your brain at the door, sit down, eat your popcorn, enjoy the movie. It's not that long. Have fun. Um,
I do love that diagnosis. I think that's really good. I think a lot of people need to listen to this.
yeah, it's just I get sick and tired of when people's criticisms are, oh, this is uninspired and this is blah blah blah. It's like look at the genre of what this movie is. This is basically uh, you know, semi-comedy vampire action film, you know, and you've got like Jamie Foxx, Dave Franco, and Snoop Dogg. You're not expecting Shakespeare in the Park. This isn't like Kenneth Branagh doing like King Lear or some shit like that.
You know what I love about that review is because I know if I'm going to watch it, I'm either going to enjoy it or I'm have to get laid.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, you win either way, dude.
Yeah. At the end of the movie, you're either going to have a smile on your face or you're going to be like, honey, bedroom now. So, yeah, it's I just look at this, a movie like this is something you have fun with. You're not like, ooh, I wonder if he's going to get the Oscar for this performance. That's not what they were shooting for. And you can tell the people in this movie are having fun. And when they're
Yeah.
having fun, it makes for a fun watch for the people watching it. So
There's something to be said for that, that sort of B movie quality where it is just fun. Like, I
yeah,
don't know where
and
you'd categorize that, but
I look at this.
there are certain movies where you just do goofy stuff just because you can,
Yeah, I
because
mean, this
everybody's
movie
having fun.
was
It's a good time.
this movie was made by Netflix to go on Netflix. It was not made to go in theaters. It was not made to go win an Oscar. And they knew that going in. When they say, "Oh, this is going to be a blue collar vampire movie film," they're not like, "Oh, maybe we get a couple Oscar nods with this one." It's not what they're going for. But as I said, like they have some really intelligent writing moments where they talk about like when they do a close up of the teeth, the guy's like, it's kind of worn, there's some nicotine stains, and he looks at this other teeth and he's like, this is almost an elder. You can see like a serration on the fangs, like it looks like little shark teeth. and they talk about why those are there, and you realize, people writing this did some homework, they did some thinking, and it made it a fun movie. So yeah, I totally do not agree with the Rotten Tomatoes or Metacritic response to this, because some of these critics, they weigh in on a movie just to justify their job, so they shit on everything, except for the one or two movies they figure is going to the Oscars. So if they shit on everything else, then their job is done. So yeah, that's my review of Day Shift.
I'm looking forward to watching it, possibly getting laid.
As I said, win-win, win-win. So way back, a long time ago, we have been watching, let's see, let me see. We have been doing a top 10 list. I'm gonna have you explain this a bit, Mike, as I get this stuff set up.
Okay, so the top 10, this is an idea I had way back when because I like exploring these meta ideas and just why do you like the things that you like? And doing a deep dive into your own subconscious and figuring out like, what are the things that you pull from the movies and why is it that you put them in a hierarchy the way that you do. As this is just like a sorting thing I love to do with myself. So over the years, I've always done that. I've tried to keep a hierarchy of movies and things that are my favorites, just again as a psychological experiment. And so I thought it would be fun to do that with the Geeking Off the Page. So we did this as an experiment way back, geez, like a year ago. And we got a few in, what, 6 in?
We got 6 in.
And then, things got complicated with the podcasts this year. So because people were fragmented and there's different dramas going on and scheduling conflicts, we kind of put this off. But this was one that both myself and Trevor were thinking, you know what, we really got to do this.
We did.
And Troy agreed. So we thought, you know what the heck, continue. Gavin might even throw something in, something with big robots probably.
Yeah.
So we figured we'll continue off on this whole top 10 movies of all time, according to the hosts of Geeking Off the Page.
Here's a little bit of a previously on for our top 10s. In episode 26, our number 10 position was discussed, and we talked about Mike, True Romance; Gavin, the Michael Bay Transformers; Trevor, Fargo; Troy, Airplane. Episode 27 had our number 9s, where Mike talked about Captain America, the Winter Soldier; Gavin, Idiocracy; Trevor, Unforgiven; Troy, A Nightmare on Elm Street, the original. Episode 29 found our number 8, and that was Mike talking about Fight Club; Gavin talking about Pacific Rim; Trevor, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? And Troy, Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Episode 30 had our number 7s, which was by Mike, Who Framed Roger Rabbit; Gavin, The Lord of the Rings; Trevor, The Exorcist; Troy, Ghostbusters. Episode 32 had our number 6 positions, where Mike talked about the original Back to the Future; Gavin talked about RoboCop; Trevor talked about Raiders of the Lost Ark; Troy talked about Captain America, the Winter Soldier. Episode 36. The number 5 position was talked about, and they were as follows. Mike talked about Ghostbusters; Gavin chose The Iron Giant; Trevor had Jaws; Troy had Back to the Future. And now you're up to date with what our number 10 through 5 is in our top 10. Let's carry on with what everyone's number 4 is.
All right, so we're going to play a quick little video.
Now, my number 4 movie, like a great portion of the other movies on my list, is a very influential film that hit my psyche at the sweet point that is in everyone's life. It's said that the movies and TV shows and music that one experiences between the ages of 8 and 12 will lock onto your personality and end up being the most important media that you will have and will mold who you will become. This particular event is part of the epic saga that those who have seen it know why it is such an influence on me. The picture opened the weekend of my 10th birthday. The number one song on the radio was Betty Davis Eyes by Kim Carnes. Pierre Elliott Trudeau was in charge of Canada, while Ronald Reagan, the actor, was running things south of the border. It opened against Clash of the Titans and History of the World Part 1, both of which were also in their opening weekend. And this movie goes on to become the top-grossing movie for 1981, followed by On Golden Pond, Superman 2, Arthur, Stripes, Cannonball Run, Chariots of Fire, For Your Eyes Only, The Four Seasons, and The Time Bandits, which wrap up the top 10. On a budget of $20 million, its opening weekend domestically was only $8.3 million. But by the end of its first theatrical release, yes, I did say first, it pulls in over $212 million. It gets a July 82 re-release, pulling in an additional $21 million, a March 83 re-release, adding another $11 million, a September 2012 IMAX release getting $3 million more, and a tiny international release in 2021 netting $116,000. Once all is said and done, the picture grosses $389,925,971 worldwide. The Lawrence Cannon written, Steven Spielberg directed, Harrison Ford, Karen Allen vehicle, Raiders of the Lost Ark. Seeing Trevor is placed as number 6, and if my other co-hosts don't have it listed on their own top 4, I'm sure it's just off of their top 10s. At this point in the timelines, the names Lucas, Spielberg, and Ford are fully linked with words like blockbuster, entertaining, spectacular vision, just to name a few. Spielberg has given us Jaws and Close Encounters, Lucas, Star Wars, and just the previous year, Empire Strikes Back, both with Harrison Ford, so there is no way for this movie not to be a disappointment. And it wasn't. Like I stated earlier, the movie was what my family went to see opening weekend as part of my birthday. We were all blown away. I can say that I'd never seen anything like this before. An adventure movie from another time with bad guys that were bad guys, good guys that weren't quite 100% good guys. The spectacular amazement, the gore of death, the excitement of the chase, the emotions of loss, the thrill of victory, and the want of more after the movie ended. Previous to this, me and my younger brother would play with our Star Wars figures, either reenacting scenes from Star Wars or Empire Strikes Back, or making up our own. After Raiders, we were Indiana Jones, going on our own adventures, finding hidden treasures, fighting hordes of evil bad guys, shooting and bullwhipping ourselves from one action scene to the next. There wasn't very much when it came to merchandising for Raiders. However, our parents got us not only the storybook version of the movie, but the illustrated screenplay of the movies, which is a wonderful thing to see when it's a wonderful thing to see what went into the making of a movie for a kid interested in that sort of thing. And as a matter of fact, I still own both. Mind you, they're definitely not they're definitely in the condition one would expect from something given to a 10-year-old 40 years ago. It's one of the few movies that not only I can recite word for word, but I know it so well that I can give you all the musical cues as well, which is another name attached to this project that makes it such a spectacular film. John Williams' unmistakable soundtrack is the cherry on the top completing this masterpiece. So when one encounters a movie such as Raiders of the Lost Ark, at that right moment, with the right environment, with the right ingredients, it becomes more than just a movie. And that's why Raiders of the Lost Ark, starring Harrison Ford, is number 4 on my top 10.
Wow. It's really good when we share some of our favorites. So I have to say, I agree with everything Troy has said about Raiders of the Lost Ark, because, again, it was, one of the ones I had in mind. It was like my top 6 movie.
I would put it at about number 12. I when we were doing the top 10, I didn't know how this wasn't in my top 10. but it just like Akira and Raiders of the Lost Ark somehow got
Yeah,
bumped down the
just
list
bumped
where
off.
it's just like, oh, but yeah, it's close.
So I'm going to segue to my choice, which, funny enough, is a Spielberg film. Um,
Oh, funny.
yeah, funny how it goes. So this film was made in 1990 or released in 1998. It was a budget of $70 million. Again, this was a Spielberg film with a huge ensemble cast. Um, and has been touted as one of the most realistic depictions of World War II. Of course, I'm talking about Saving Private Ryan. Um, for the people who don't know, who if you've been hiding in a cave or under a rock, Saving Private Ryan deals with it starts in the current time, and it's a elderly veteran gentleman is walking through a military cemetery, and he collapses to his knees in front of a tomb, like a tombstone, and it comes back to Omaha Beach, part of the D-Day invasion, Normandy invasion, and this was one of the hardest sequences to watch, especially in the theater, because it was probably one of the most realistic depictions of the invasion. Like, people weren't getting shot and doing the big heroic pirouette and landing, going, "Oh, I've been shot. Oh, how will I?" No, people just drop. People are having arms blown off and like looking around, seeing like a couple of different limbs floating around and picking them up, like, "Is this my arm?" Um, people screaming for their mom. Medics trying to stop bleeding on someone, and someone takes a round to the head and like, "Well, dump him, let's go to the next." And it follows Captain John Miller and his squad as they're trying to advance their way up the beach. And again, such a hard scene to watch. Really, like that whole sequence, very, very hard, but beautifully shot.
One of the best combat sequences of all time, in
It
my
is.
opinion.
It really is. And then we find out that so there are the Ryan brothers, and it's a group of brothers, and some have been lost throughout. And it turns out the last Ryan, James Ryan, is the last of all the Ryan brothers. All the other Ryan brothers have died, and the war, basically, the war officer says, State Department war says, "All right, we've got to pull that guy out. We've got to send him back home. He's the only living son. We can't deliver, all these, condolence letters and saying your entire group of sons have all been wiped out. Your family line ends." So they task Miller and his squad with finding Ryan and getting him out because he had parachuted in behind enemy lines. What happens next over this movie is 189 minutes. It's over 3 hours. Um, and
Jeez, I didn't even realize that, honestly, because
it
it's so good.
no, so 169 minutes, so just under 3 hours. It does not feel that long. This movie,
No.
it feels like it moves at such a fast pace that when the squad stops and takes a rest, it's almost like you just exhale. Your whole body just goes like a sigh of relief, like, I have a chance to rest, and then they get up and get going again, and you're right along with them. And as I said, this movie has a huge ensemble cast. You've got Tom Hanks, Ed Burns, Matt Damon, Tom Sizemore, Vin Diesel, Barry Pepper, Giovanni Ribisi, Ted Danson. It goes on and on and on. All the different people they've kind of pulled in to make this movie. And it's it ends up they hook up with Ryan, and they want to pull him back, but right now the Germans are advancing across a bridge, and they're like, "Well, we got to dig in and fight them off." Like, there's no ifs, ands, or buts. This is kind of like a last stand situation, and you feel it. You feel it in your gut, just how hopeless this situation feels. And yeah, this movie was. I remember seeing it in the theater, and just walking to that theater, like, having the feeling that I need to go back in and see it again. it had such a big impact on me. And it's hard to describe the feelings you feel at the end of the film, but it's this is it was a huge step in filmmaking, like just tackling something, you know, of this magnitude, but not shying away and not like, oh, well, the invasion happened and then go jump right in. Spielberg took a huge risk showing that invasion. And I remember reading for weeks after, like, veterans of World War II having a tough time watching that opening sequence because it hit home so hard for them.
I heard those stories too. Yeah, and I understand why, because it basically puts you right back there in that moment. And
Yeah.
those guys came out of the boats, and you see that first layer just
Yeah.
dropping.
Just dropping left and right. So this film had, to me, it was um such a visceral effect in terms of what you could do with great cinematography. There was such a strong story that it couldn't help but elevate the visuals and the sound. And the cinematography was just like, what's his Janusz Kaminski. I mean, that guy, such an eye for the visual. Like, it just every every scene felt not crafted in the way that felt artificial, but crafted in the way that felt real. And yeah, you felt like you were one of the guys in this squad just marching along shoulder to shoulder with these guys. And it was such a roller coaster of emotions that by the time that you got to the end, you were exhausted. And as I said, I came out of the theater, emotionally exhausted, feeling like, what did I just see? And then walked right back to the box office, bought another ticket, went right back in. And that's one of the reasons why this movie's on my top 10 list, is because very few movies I have ever seen where I come out and go in and see it again. Like, not even like, oh, I'll see it the next day, or, I'll go have dinner or go have lunch and then come see it. Like, I just, another 3 hours invested. And
That's awesome.
it stuck with me. I mean, this movie was just shot so beautifully, telling such a great story. I mean, and the thing is that I was lucky enough, the theater I was in had a great sound system. So like when the bullets are whizzing by, they would run it through the speakers on the side to the speakers behind you. And you'd almost like dodge to the side as the bullets whip by your head. To me, that's just understanding the craft of filmmaking, understanding the craft of sound design and running with it and doing it spectacularly. So for people who want the numbers, this movie was made for a budget of 70 million, pulled in its box office of 485 million. It's not a bad return on your investment. And this movie was nominated for 11 Academy Awards. I mean, usually I don't hold the Oscars as like, all right, this is the best movie, because sometimes the Oscars it's not the best movies that they're putting out there or the most successful movies. But this one included Best Picture, Best Actor for Tom Hanks, Best Original Screenplay. It ended up winning 5 of its 11, including, which was very well deserved, Best Cinematography, Best Sound, Best Special Effects, Editing, Best Film Editing, Best Director for Spielberg, and it was all richly deserved. Now, Best Picture went to Shakespeare in Love, which I kind of disagreed with, because Shakespeare in Love was an okay movie, but it was no Saving Private Ryan. Um, it's widely considered one of the best films ever made. I know the American Film Institute has included it in many of its lists, ranking it. I think it's currently ranked in the 71st greatest American film of the last 100 years. I feel take the one off, make it like the 7th best film of all time. Anyways, that's my personal feelings. As I said, I really enjoy this movie. This is a movie that if I'm scrolling through on TV and it comes on, I just stop. I put the remote down and just watch, because I have such a great time with this film. It is truly a timeless film. And that's why this movie is number 4 on my top 10 movies.
It's interesting you say that because, when I have this backdrop, this is when I'm at the family cottage, and they all know we do the Geeking Off the Page podcast every Saturday night. And so I mentioned to my little brother Brad that we're going to be doing the top 10 again. And he started talking about movies. It's like, yeah, I like hearing what you say about movies and what movies are your favorites. And, like I like, following them and seeing, and yeah, they're all good ones. And then he started talking about his favorite movies. Like, one of the movies I like is Goodfellas. It's like, yeah, that's a great movie. Like, if we're doing crime movies of all time, that's definitely one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And another one, Saving Private Ryan. It's like, yeah, that's definitely like one of the best war movies of all time. So the fact we were just talking about that, like an hour ago, it's so cool that's on your list.
Well, you can tell them it's number 4 on my list.
Nice.
So, Mike, what's number 4 on your top 10 list?
So there's this movie that came out just a couple months before my oldest daughter was born. It's probably the last movie I saw in the theaters before I was a father. And I was pretty sure it was going to be Johnny Mnemonic 2. So there's some other, sci-fi movie with Keanu Reeves as a hacker. It's like, really? Are we doing this again? I mean, Johnny Mnemonic was fun, but we're going to go at it again? All right, let's do it again. And then I saw The Matrix. And that was one that just exploded my brain. Again, coming in with it, with that preconceived notion of another Johnny Mnemonic. Because again, okay, we're all cyberpunk fans. We did the cyberpunk role playing back in college with John Scallon, and Akira, like I said, is probably number 11 on my list. The only reason it hit number 11 is because it didn't have the solid story like the actual comic had, like the manga had. It was so expansive, and we just got a little slice. Otherwise, that would probably be like in my top 3. But the cyberpunk genre was something I was a huge fan of going into this, and seeing all the things that they took and added to it and twisted, it was incredible. I was completely blown out of my mind. The bullet time, this is one where just recently, even this year, I guess it was, watched it with my kids. It's like, you guys have to see this. It's like, well, it's kind of late, we're tired. Okay, just watch the opening sequence with Trinity against the agents, and they were watching that, they were 100% hooked. When we watched the full movie, it's like, wait, Dad, I know that meme. Like, that meme's from this. This meme is from that. This, I know. Guys, this like, revolutionized filmmaking. Like, there's so many memes after, like the amount of bullet times that they've seen in films and all that, like all these different things. They were all waiting to see when Neo was going to dodge the bullets, which is funny when you're saying in the theater with like bullets going, everybody's just like, when does he dodge the bullets, Dad? It's like, just wait and watch the movie. It is really good. But this is a movie by the Wachowski brothers. Like, they were the Wachowski brothers at the time. And they pulled so many different elements from so many different things. And it was always fascinating to me to watch the behind the scenes where they were explaining what they were doing, how they were pulling from Frank Miller. And we talked about that before, how you can take like a Frank Miller drawing and it's like, yeah, that's a cinematic panel. And you watch The Matrix and you can see those panels. Like, you can tell the stuff that they ripped right out of a Frank Miller comic. There's all the different, I guess, mythologies with Alice in Wonderland and the White Rabbit, all that kind of stuff. There's a whole bunch of like really deep ideas about technocracy and where that leads you to. The whole fact that, like, even to this day, you say take the red pill. That's found in nomenclature all over the place today. And taking the red pill means to awaken your mind. And that's like, you can find that everywhere. That came from this movie. I don't know if it existed before that, but like, that's where I learned of it. The kung fu and the fact that the actors all actually learned the moves, right? They actually essentially became kung fu experts, at least to look good on film. And they did their stunts. And Carrie Ann Moss had said that one where she runs up against the wall and does the cartwheel flip, she could always do in rehearsal, but when it came time to shoot, she could never land it, and she regretted it. So they gave her a second chance in The Matrix 2, where she could actually land it and do it the whole thing. But that's one where like everybody leveled up. Lawrence Fishburne as Morpheus, his performance, like it's funny. I saw a meme recently how he was on Pee Wee Herman as Cowboy, whatever his name was. I
Cowboy
didn't even
Curtis.
remember that. So funny, but yeah, him as Morpheus, like such a great character. And I love the fact that his glasses didn't even connect to his ears. No, they just latched on his nose. Um, and it has one of the best action sequences of all time, and in my opinion, when they go to save Morpheus and they have to walk through the metal detectors. Like, do you have any metal on? And it just like, yeah, like what the? Then everything goes bullet time, and the guns go, and the explosions. That was fun to watch behind the scenes on as well. Like just watching like what they had to do to get that stuff on film. I mean, we've talked about this on previous podcasts where we talk about Star Wars and how the practical effects and all the things they had to do, like they had to think outside the box, and you see all that stuff in this movie, like with the bullet time, with a whole bunch of cameras looped around the character, and the way they incorporated CG, because you're looking at the humans and the humans are real, but you're not really paying attention to the background, so you can CG that kind of stuff. All that stuff was great. And then just like the deep psychological elements of it, like what is real? Are we living in a simulation? Like what happens if AI takes over? The ideas start getting really deep, and the whole like Alice in Wonderland, Follow the White Rabbit, and all these different things, and you can be somebody that you're not, which gets kind of ironic how the Wachowski brothers became just the Wachowskis, right?
Mhm.
So there's a transformational element, and I don't know if that stuff existed when they were writing the story, like that's where it came from, but there's something that you connect to. It's like I'm somewhere where I don't feel I should be. I think I can be more than what I am. I think I can evolve past this. And essentially, that's the heroic archetype. That's the whole idea of the hero wandering into the wilderness and then coming back with the elixir or the dragon gold or whatever it is. And this movie ends on Neo with the phone call, which I think is one of the greatest endings of any movie of all time. Where it's like, I don't know how this is going to end, but this is how it's going to begin. And, he basically gives the AI an ultimatum, and then he flies into the sky like Superman. And when that happened, I was so jazzed for any other Matrix movie. Unfortunately, I would be disappointed. But another fun fact is when Matrix 2 was released, that's when I was working on Hellboy at Tippett, and Tippett was also working on Matrix 3. And that was under tight security. And, you couldn't go into the building unless you were part of the production crew. And I tried so hard to at least animate one shot on that because The Matrix was one of my favorite movies of all time. But I was too busy. I was on Hellboy and then going straight to Constantine. That's one cool thing about the experience with Tippett is I was always part of the core group, but I didn't get to get my mouse clicks in on some of the other ones, like Matrix 3 and Catwoman. I was kind of glad I dodged that one.
I think a lot of people are glad you dodged that one.
But yeah, for sure, The Matrix is one of my favorites because of the cyberpunk genre, adding in the kung fu, the real time stunts, the comic book references, and like the really deep heroic myth stuff that happens inside of it. So yeah, that's a solid number 4 on my list.
As a fun little side note, I saw The Matrix. I was working in Toronto, and Troy had camped out at the Coliseum Theater in Mississauga to see this little film called Star Wars: The Phantom Menace. And I had finished my shift where I was working, took the GO train to Mississauga, took the bus up there, and he was waiting in line. He was holding spots he was getting tickets for all of us, holding spots. That's fine. And he said, before we go in for the showing of Phantom Menace, you know, may as well go in and watch a movie. And I was like, okay. Now at this point, I was so busy, I had heard practically nothing about The Matrix. Like I had and Troy had religiously watched like Entertainment Tonight and all the other shows and had kept
As
up
he always does.
as he usually did. And I had watched nothing. I didn't even know it was out. Didn't even know what it was about. And so myself and a couple others went in the theater, and I'm like, all right, what are we going to see? At this point, I'd already worked a full shift. I was tired. I was like, and they're like, let's go see Matrix. I was like, Matrix, okay, sure, whatever. And sat down, and that movie just steamrolled right over top of me. And I remember coming out thinking, almost ready to say, fuck Star Wars. Let's go see Matrix again. Because that was great. And yeah, there was so many revolutionary visuals. It was an interesting story. It was well acted. I know Kung Fu. I mean, all of that. And the movie is eminently quotable. It has firmly lodged itself into, the society is like the different references, like, take the red pill or the blue pill. I know Kung Fu. I mean, all that stuff. And I will say that movie is in my top 20, but did not make it into my top 10, but not by much. Like just it like the narrowest of margins. So yeah, when you started the setup, I was like, oh, he's talking about the Matrix. He's 100% talking about the goddamn Matrix, isn't he? So yeah, it was fun listening to your recounting because I'm like, I'm 100% there with you the whole way. So yeah, that's
One
cool.
fun thing watching it with the kids is the landline reference. Because you talk
Yes.
about all the references, like, wait, a landline? What's a landline? Wait, how does that connect? What? It's like a spawn point in a video game. And phones used to be connected to walls. It's like,
Yeah. I
oh,
remember having to explain that. I mean, this was in God 2011. 2011? Was it really that long ago? Yeah, 20. A student was giving a report about, I'd pick a movie and he picked The Matrix, and he's like, I never understood why they had to go to landlines. And I took him aside and said, because the landline is wired, they can't hack the signal of a wire. That's why they can't use the cell phones to pull themselves out. They have to use a wired line to pull themselves out. And he's like, oh, well, why don't they just get a wire and connect it to the phone and do it that way? And I'm like, they probably didn't think of it.
that's not how the force works.
Yeah. So it was funny having to explain some of this stuff to people that, cell phones, but by 2010, 2011, cell phones were such a big thing anyway. Everyone has a
Yeah.
cell phone. Like, well, why can't they just, and it's like, because that's the how they go transfer between, the fantasy and the reality is that wired connection. That's why when they cut the hard line, they cut the landline, you can't get out. You can't pull your cell
Yeah.
phone because they can hack that wireless signal. When he got it, he was like, "Oh, well, wait, why didn't you say before?" Oh, okay. Yeah, the youth of today.
Kids.
Yeah, those kids. So, I'm gonna do a quick little thing now. Mike is a little behind the times. He just finally found the trailer for Cobra Kai
Yeah, I'm,
next season.
kind of
Um,
time
and
skipping a couple months late.
yeah, and seems to be shocked that the next season is starting. When was that, Mike? September 9th?
September 9th.
Yeah, just around the corner, honestly. We're like what, 3.5, 4 weeks away, if that, maybe 3 weeks away.
Yeah.
So yeah, I am looking forward to it personally because Chosen shows up.
You're
So
playing with fire.
I'm
I'm gasoline.
it's just a great line. It really is.
It's so good. And
So yeah.
like, I was talking with this with the kids today too, because we were all getting hyped up, coming up here and talking about it. And they were like, wait a second, where was Chosen from? It's like, he was literally the guy trying to kill Daniel in Karate Kid 2. It's like, oh, and then they started pulling Naruto references. Like, he's like Sasuke, and it's kind of true. And so the fact that they're coming in like that, and then seeing Silver like actually unleashing his master plan of a franchise
Yep,
of Cobra
franchise
Kai,
Cobra Kai all
it's
across the valley.
so ridiculous and so funny. And Johnny going in, wearing FBI shirts. It's like, what the hell?
Yeah,
And I'm so curious to see Miguel and Robbie, how that's going to play out.
they're
I forget
never.
the line in the trailer, but it's like, never going to be friends.
Yeah,
It's like, oh, they're going to be best buds,
right.
binary brothers by the end of it.
Yeah. Did we just become best friends? Yep. It's gonna happen.
Yeah.
Other things that are coming up for people who are keeping score. So later this month, last week of August, on Amazon Studios, there is a Sylvester Stallone film, oddly enough, called Samaritan, where he is a retired superhero who gets pulled out of retirement. The trailer is kind of fun. If you haven't seen it, by all means, watch it. Again, this is like, the equivalent of a Netflix or an Amazon or a direct to HBO. This isn't high society, people. This isn't like we're hunting for Oscars. Just turn your brain off and enjoy. I know for a fact that Metacritic and Rotten Tomatoes are going to shit all over it like they usually do. And all I'm going to say to it now is, unless this is absolute horseshit, go fuck yourselves. So yeah, a lot of these movies, like all the MCU movies, you can't go in thinking, "Ooh, I'm going to see some high society movie," or "Ooh, Oscar nominated best picture movie." You're just watching.
Unless it's Captain America, Winter Soldier,
Yeah,
or
you're watching
maybe Infinity War.
what I call popcorn entertainment movie.
Yeah.
You if it requires you to pull out some physics books and stuff like that while you're watching the film, you're probably not having a good time, unless that's your sort of thing. If that's how you have your enjoyment, you do you. For
Not
me,
that there's anything wrong with that.
nothing wrong with it, but I like films where, yeah, I like movies that make you think. I like movies that require you to like laser focus your attention, but I also like movies where you can just sit back and enjoy and be like, take the cares of the worries of the world and just kind of push them behind you for a little while, watch the movie, eat your popcorn, have some fun, and then just, carry on with your life. I really tire of critics shitting all over other people's movies. If I look at it as, when I see a critic routinely shitting on other people's films, the question is, well, if you're such a goddamn genius, step up to the plate.
Are you talking to me
Goddamn.
personally?
No, I'm just saying to
Oh,
anyone.
okay.
Like when
Just
Siskel and
checking,
Ebert, I just remember Siskel and Ebert consistently would shit all over films, and I was just always like, if you're such a goddamn genius when it comes to films, step up to the goddamn plate. Let's see a movie by Siskel and Ebert. Come on, let's see how great you can
Yeah.
do.
That's one thing I like to do with this podcast too, because I do have criticisms. We both do. We're probably the two most critical of the
What?
batch.
No.
But it's fun to try and come up with solutions, right? So if you have a criticism, try and brainstorm it. It's like, how would this work better? How could you do this better? It's like, okay, maybe we haven't made the great film masterpiece, but we got some good ideas.
Yeah. Actually,
if Kevin Feige was listening.
Yeah. Actually, back in our Sheridan days, when we were in film structures class, it was Mark Simon that always said, when we had to work in groups, when you're working a group, just don't say that, that shit or that doesn't work. If you can't come up with a solution to your criticism, shut the fuck up. So if you just say, well, that's garbage, tell me why and tell me how to fix it. Otherwise, don't say a goddamn thing.
Yeah. And that's the other thing too, is like when you're doing collaborative things, it's sort of like somebody throws an idea, don't just crap on it. But it's like what they do in improv, like when improv actors and comedians do things. You never say no. You take that idea and bounce it back, and then they come up with that idea and bounce it back. And it can go to completely ridiculous places.
Absolutely.
But you can get some crazy ideas, but you don't say no. Like, you don't shut the idea down.
Exactly.
So like even with this kind of brainstorming thing in a podcast where it's like, well, this idea is not good, but you could do this, you could do this. It's like, well, yes, but you could also do this. Oh, well, this. And that's where the ideas come from. So yeah, like what I always try to do when I start crapping on things like casting and death,
Come up with a
like
solution.
you right. And you see it's like there's something here that could have been gold. And that's my opinion. People don't have to agree. They can say I'm whitewashing or whatever, but it doesn't matter. It's like for me, that's what I thought the casting would be
Yeah, I mean
or
that's what
should
we
be.
did when we rewrote Star Wars or rewrote Anakin, or sorry, Obi-Wan Kenobi. Is you have the opportunity. That's why, like, sometimes, like, you watch a series on Netflix or you watch a series on Disney Plus, and you're like, you have the opportunity, but you blew it. You went, you had that straight victory right to the finish line, and the last
Which
second
is
you're
what I
like,
thought for Dune.
yeah, and instead you're like tortoise and haired it, or you just took a hard right, and then you're like, where the fuck you go? The finish line's right over there, folks. Oh well, okay.
Like, you could have won.
You could have,
You could have first place. Yay.
yeah. And instead of just saying, well, that's just garbage, and then
Right.
saying nothing else, saying, well, this was bad because of these reasons. If they had done this instead, or maybe even taken it in this direction, the end result would have been better. To me, that's a positive collaborative effort. But to just say, no, that's garbage, and then to say nothing else, that's just a waste of
Yeah.
time. I mean, you're just
Yeah.
wasting your time and theirs. Because now you're putting the onus on them to come up with a solution. Well, if you didn't like it, say why. Give me a reason.
I've worked with people like that. Like, nope, don't like it. Do something else. Give me something to work with here, man.
I had a line. Well, it was the line producer and the owner that was like that of one of the companies I worked for. That would He'd just be like, nope, nope, why? You know, give me more. You
Yeah.
just say nope, but then you give no other feedback, then I have to assume I have to start from scratch. But if you're saying, oh, well, I don't like this part of it, well, then I can change that part. Or if you don't like this part, but why? Then I can probably, the next iteration is going to hit all the marks you want to see.
Yeah. And both of us have done coaching things like that, like you with Taekwondo and like me with sports,
Mhm.
where you have to give that to people. Like when
Yeah.
you're trying to train somebody, you don't just say nope. It's
Yeah.
like, no, this is how you improve. This is how you do it better. This is a technique. This is an idea. Let's try this strategy. Let's do these things.
Exactly.
And
And
and you can see if it works. And when it works, it's beautiful.
yeah, I love seeing that light in the student's eyes when they get it. That is, to me, it's one of the most magical moments when you're teaching something or training someone, and they reach that aha moment and everything
Yes.
clicks and they get it. It's not just they succeed in doing it once, but they get why they're doing it and why it's working. And it's a great moment because they're going to carry that moment with them for the rest of their lives. You've
And that's one of the most
possibly,
magical things in movies is when you're watching a movie and people get those moments. Like, and I'm
yes,
sure like all of our top 10 movies have those moments in it where
every
people
one of my
get
films
that
does.
same look.
It
Yeah.
has that moment where I'm just like, this moment has made me a better person in some way. And it's stuff like that movies, TV shows, books, training in martial arts. It's looking for those moments. Like, even teaching art to kids. When I see them get that aha moment, it is so rewarding for me because I know I've just made a positive impact on their life that they're going to carry with them forever. And it's just like, this is my legacy. And as you get older, you look for more of those legacy moments. As you become more aware of your own mortality, those legacy moments add up, and you get your feeling of self-value and self-worth, and that you're not just going to disappear and people are going to forget you. And
100%.
yeah, I don't need a big marble statue. I don't need a building with my name on it.
We'll make one.
Yeah. I want people to remember, like, oh yeah, he showed me this and it really helped, or oh, I remember that guy, he helped these people, and they did something great. I mean, I don't need to have monuments made in my honor. um I want to have an impact on the people that I'm around while I'm here. Or sorry, a positive impact on the people I'm around. I can
Good
have a
correction.
very negative impact on people. So yeah, so it's doing these sorts of things like when we collaborate in these things, like the critiques we give and things like that. I get a big kick out of them. I really do.
Yeah,
Um,
same here.
it's one of the reasons why I enjoy doing this podcast every week. Because it's hearing other people's ideas. You know, they may not agree with my, they may not be they may not agree with my idea, but I like hearing those other points of view because I get something good out of it, and hopefully my opinions, they get something good out of it. And
Yeah, and there's something very therapeutic when you can communicate a different idea in a non-hostile way with someone who doesn't necessarily agree 100%,
mhm,
because that starts a conversation, right?
exactly.
It's not just spewing propaganda, it's actually exploring ideas with friends, like-minded people, and hopefully you can grow from that.
I agree. I agree. 100,000%. All right. So I think this is going to wrap up episode 49 of Geeking Off the Page. If you're still listening, kudos to you. Hopefully
Good
we
for you. You might have learned something. Woohoo!
you might have learned something. So we will be back with episode 50 just around the corner. 50 episodes. Wow. That's been a lot.
That's more than 49.
It is exactly one more. So you can listen to us on your favorite podcasting websites, or I'm sure you're going to see the video on YouTube. Like, subscribe, leave a comment. If there's something you like, comment on it. Something you don't like, leave a comment. We'd love to be able to give some, get some feedback from people so that we can answer your criticisms or your wants or desires. Um, we will be back again and again and again and again until this gets boring and we don't like it anymore, which will be a while. Anyways, that's all from me. And should we do a collective goodbye, Mike?
Yeah, let's just do it.
All right, in 3.
Collective goodbye.
I think that's our best yet.
Maybe.
It took 49, 7 sevens to get it there.
Oh, just wait till 50.
Oh, it's gonna be magical. There'll be horns playing and confetti falling, and it'll be great.
Take a note, Troy.
And I'll even see if I can get us maybe 1 or 2 special guests to join us for episode 50.
Oh,
Oh, indeed. All right. Good night, folks.
good night.
This has been Geeking Off the Page, a Planet Geek production. Please be sure to subscribe, share, rate, and review. You can find us at our social medias through Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok. Search for Planet Geek Productions. On Instagram and Twitter, Planet Geek Pod. Or you can send us an email at planetgeekpod@gmail.com. So until next bad time, same Spider Channel, may the Force be with you, and thanks for tuning in.
I couldn't really attach myself to it because it just in my head, because the casting was wrong. And what's her name?
Oh, the woman who plays Death?
Yeah. Come on, IMDb. Why is that not even on the top casting list? Darn it. Okay, I gotta go to the full list. It's a hard name that I don't even know how to pronounce.
I'm sure you could do it.
You're gonna have to do a little bit of editing here, Troy. Or you can just let it go. Or this could be end credits.
Gianni. No, that's the Death Stalker. Hold on, I'm looking as well. DATH.
It's a good thing we're not doing this live.
There he is. Kirby Howell Batiste.
That's the one.